staff.
Directly work with the developer. The other ones are like marketing.
Where's Nicole?
Well, that's probably why they have enough staff.
Have you speaking to this one?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yeah, that's-
welcome to the
Volunteers.
Volunteer.
meeting of the South Pennsylvania Genealogy Society for the 2022-2023 program year. My name is Jonathan Stair, and I'm the president. Glad that you all here today. Particularly excited because we get to hear about one of my favorite places in York County, Camp Superior. So we'll be hearing about that later. Is anybody here for the first time? Never been with us before? Want to tell us your name, where you're from, and what you're researching?
Oh, well, I'm David and Colleen Stewart from Calhoun Bay, California,
Okay,
and I just thought on the.
so you want to find out about Camp Superior today?
Yeah.
All right, good. Anybody else here for the first time? Yes, sir.
Jim Marsteller, yeah, we come into this building for other lectures and so forth. This is for comment for your project.
Okay. Great. Well, welcome to all of you. We're going to start with Richard Robinstein in the minutes from our April meeting.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jonathan opened the April 2nd meeting, York County. There's an attendance. We had one new attendee at the time. I read minutes of last March 5th, 2023's meeting, and they have been approved and they've been filed. Margaret Bird gave the Treasury report, the balance sheet of March 2023. Can everybody hear me all right? The balance for February 28, 2023 was $15,927.92. Receipt for March membership renewal was 95, new membership 190, publication sales at 128. Genealogy seminar registry was 260 for a total of $673. Disbursement for the speaker was 125, and for a total March net balance for March 31st. It was $16,474.92. As membership stood at 140, two renewals, one for 2 years, 4 new members, and 2 paying for 2 years. Nicole gave a highlight on upcoming events for April and May. Jonathan discussed different accomplishments and upcoming projects for society. The bylaws were voted upon and approved. All those present and all those that were present approved those bylaws, and they are now the motion was confirmed. That's how we're standing. Also, the ballots of the officers for the upcoming year. The Treasury, Margaret continued on as that. Recording Secretary, I can set out continuing as well. Corresponding Secretary Rebecca Einstein going to continue as well. Director at Large Mindy is stepping down, and Jonathan asked that if anybody was interested in filling his position as Director of Public Development, as well as a public relations, let him know. June's meeting, those positions will be voted upon. A new committee was formed for the 50th anniversary of the society, which will be coming up, and that will be Margaret Berg, Richard Kunkel, and Mindy Stallard, and she'll be assisting. Jonathan's filled in for Mr. Kunkel. Mr. Kunkel wasn't here at the time. That's all.
Thank you, Richard. Margaret, credit report and membership.
Okay, the balance as of March 31st, 2023, $16,475.92. Receipts for April, membership renewals, $390. Total receipts, $390. Disbursements for April, postal connection for the March-April newsletter, $171.45. Postal connections for the printing of publication number 89, $1,051.36. The postal service for mailing publication 89, $364.56. Total disbursements, $1,587.37, leaving the net cash balance as of April 30th, 2023, $15,278.55. For May, the receipts, there were no receipts in May. The disbursements, postal connection for the May-June newsletter, $139.57. To Becky Anstein for miscellaneous publication mailings. To St. Luke's Lutheran Church Cemetery Association for speaker fee, $125. Total disbursements, $303.28, leaving the cash balance as of May 31st, $14,975.27. The membership, and this is as of today, we have a membership of 140, and we are in the process of receiving renewals in that, which are all due by July 1st. We have received renewals, 42 for 1 year renewal, and 2 of those were returning members who hadn't been a member for a year or a couple of years. We have 38 who have taken a 2-year membership, and they took the 2-year membership last year. They are considered renewals because their expiration date for their membership is June 30th of 2024. We have people who have just recently paid enough to get them through to 2025. We have 3 of those, and we have 2 that are, their membership is good till 2026. And for the new members that we've received since July 1st of 2022 is now 7. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
We're doing great.
Nicole.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Just a couple of quick announcements before we get started. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on the York County History Center YouTube channel. A couple upcoming programs. On June 14th, we have a new program called Hidden Histories about David Etter Small, an advocate for freedom seekers. The speaker is Guy Dunham, and the program will be held at First Presbyterian Church. On June 21st, the Civil War Roundtable. The program will be telling York County's full Civil War story at last with Jim McClure. And on June 28th, our All Vets program speaker is Bob Myers, a Navy veteran. For more information on our programs and to register, please visit yorkhistorycenter.org. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Just a couple items of business. First of all, we need to vote on the ballot of new officers. As Richard mentioned, these will be the officers on whom we will be voting. For treasurer, Margaret Berg, you heard from her. Recording secretary, Richard Robinstein. Corresponding secretary, Becky Anstein, back there. And Jason Miller has agreed to serve as a director at large. So I'd like to have a motion to accept the ballot as presented. Second? I have a second. Any discussion? All those who are members say aye if you're in favor.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I do want to thank Mindy once again for her time on the board. I didn't see her here this afternoon, but I was glad that she could serve with us. I also want to thank all those. You may remember that we did a series of classes for the Central York County Senior Center down in New Freedom. And many of our members will participate in that, including Richard Kunkel, Lynn Nelson, Margaret Berg, Becky Ann Stein, and Erica Runkles. Myself as well. But I'd like to thank all of you folks for doing that. That was very well received. It was so well received, they want us to do it again. So it might be a recurring thing for us. We are still looking for a director of publicity or publications. And if you would like to take that role, we are kind of looking for somebody who might have some social media experience, which is not me since I barely checked my Facebook page. At all. One announcement, the State Archives is closed. If you haven't heard that already, the State Archives will be closed till about November. They're moving into a new facility. I did receive, or I got an email last week that their occupancy permit has been delayed, so it's going to delay their reopening a little bit. They're not going to actually start moving the collections now until I think July is their plan. Hopefully it'll be again in November. Our program today is on camp security, and we did bring some of our stuff to sell. So if you want to get a postcard or a cap or a little booklet, also if you join today at the $50 level or above, you get a free cap, a free booklet, and a free pin. Any other news that anybody would like to share with the group before we have our speaker? I'm going to ask Richard Kunkel to come tell us about upcoming programs and introduce the speaker.
I'm Richard Crawmer, Vice President of the Society. Today's program is our last program for this fiscal year for the Society. So our new fiscal year starts July 1st, and our first program, to avoid Labor Day, we have it the last Sunday of August, and that would be August the 27th. And we don't have a program lined up yet for that. We will shortly. So stay tuned and you will find out about that. We're very pleased today to have with us John Crawmer. John Crawmer is an archaeologist who has conducted research in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Maryland, and Israel. And he's going to tell us all about his experiences as the lead archaeologist at the Camp Security Archaeology Project here in York County. Camp Security, he's going to tell us a lot more about that as well, is America's last surviving Revolutionary War prisoner of war camp. And it's believed that they have, in the last year, found the actual location where it is was located. So without further ado, if you please welcome John Crawmer, who's the lead archaeologist for Camp Security.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. Like you said, my name is John Crawmer, lead archaeologist for the Camp Security Archaeological Project. Today's talk is mostly going to focus on the archaeology itself. I will give a brief history about Camp Security, but I am not a historian. I'm an archaeologist. So we have two wonderful historians right here who've done lots and lots of research. That would be John Stair, the president, and Boyd. So if you have any real specific questions regarding documents and history, they're the people to ask. If you want to talk about holes in the ground, I'm the guy to ask. So some of the points that I want to sort of go over a little bit today, a little bit about why camp security is important, some of the techniques of how archaeologists find sites and dig sites. And most importantly, we're going to answer the question that people have been asking for literally over a century. Where is camp security? So first we got to find out what it is. So camp security really refers to a camp complex. It's not just one stockade strictly guarded. It's actually refers to two camps, a hospital, it also looks like a cemetery about a quarter-mile away. The camp complex was opened in July 1781 and held somewhere between 800 to 1,200 British POWs who were captured after the battles of Saratoga and Yorktown. The York camp held regular soldiers and NCOs. Commissioned officers were held in Lancaster, and German Hessian soldiers were sent to Reading. The prisoners at the York camp included British soldiers, women, and children. So, like I was saying, it wasn't just a stockade, and not all prisoners were held within the stockade. Some were permitted to build huts outside the stockade in a village called Camp Indulgence. And the reason this was called Camp Indulgence was because the prisoners here were able to not only build their own huts, but they had some freedom to be able to leave their huts, go to downtown New York, work on farms surrounding the camp, earn money, and interestingly enough, it's this a little later, archaeologically, we actually find lots of window glass in this area, which at the time, having windows was kind of a big deal, that you were taxed on the number of windows in your house. So it's kind of interesting to think that these POWs are building huts with glass windows. A big hint in terms of finding out where camp security is that we have prisoner accounts that place this Camp Indulgence about 200 yards away from the stockade. And it's on rising ground relative to the stockade. And this here. And these are some drawings. Now, these drawings weren't made like during the revolution. This was done much later. It's based on the account of Sergeant Roger Lamb, who was a prisoner at Camp Security. A dead giveaway as to why this isn't period, like these fun little hats. These are more Napoleonic. They're not period. Anyway, so like I mentioned briefly, a camp cemetery was placed about a quarter mile from the camps. There's some anecdotal evidence to say that could be near Penn Oaks, a residential neighborhood. But again, this is anecdotal evidence. We don't have any true evidence to say that that's the case. In 1781, a hospital had started construction, but also we don't know if it was completed. A disease sort of swept through camps and killed off a lot of people. And by the time they had started building this hospital, there really wasn't much of a need because they already swept. The camps were vacated in early May 1783. So just to quickly summarize, camp security was a complex of primarily two residential camps, included huts for guard, activity areas, a cemetery, and possibly a hospital. It was guarded by a stockade. The Camp Indulgence was unguarded, and the prisoners there had a lot more freedom relative to those in the stockade. This facility was built in 1781, was inhabited for 22 months, and camp population varied from 800 to 1,200 prisoners. We do not have historic maps because that would just be too easy. The historic accounts tell us that the camps were separated by 200 yards, with Camp Indulgence being on a hill outside the stockade. That is pretty much our best evidence. Best thing to go on. All right, so historic deed records show that the camps were built on land owned by David Brubaker. Brubaker made claims for losses that he incurred due to the camp's construction. And these claims indicate that the camps, first of all, were located on his tract. And it also gives us some hints in terms of what the landscape looked like at the time the camps were built. So he mentions that it was cleared 30 acres of wood. They used large quantities that were growing on the plantation. And they cleared that all away. Unfortunately, old David Brubaker, I don't think he got any money from the state from his complaint. But luckily for us, because of this, we know that camps were on his tracks. So, based on this deed evidence, the camp security preservation area, which is the fun red area here, was created to preserve 160 acres of this historic Brubaker tract. Just for reference, we're around here. Stop here. So this is a little closer up picture of the preservation area. So it is a big area, and it's divided roughly into 4 fields. And there's a tree line that runs this way, another tree line that runs this way, that sort of create these quadrants. We have the row, lower and upper fields, and then the least, lower and upper fields. The row name that refers to property, a property owner, least same deal. In terms of water, we've got a large spring right here in the center of these intersecting tree lines. And then we have a creek that runs all the way down. Up here is present day game security park, hence the soccer field and playground. And we have the Schultz house, which was built in the 1750s and is one of the oldest houses in York County. It was standing while when the camps were in operation. It is also the only historic property left standing in this area. All right, so before we get into all the fun maps and where all the archaeology is, I sort of want to go over how we dig a hole archaeologically, because I think it'll give a little bit more context in terms of why we think something's a thing, why we dig, really dig. So to dig a hole, you're going to grab your trusty old shovel, and you're going to start shoveling, just like this. And the key here is that you want to shovel flat, because we don't want to dig straight down, because if you dig straight down, we'll likely plunge into something, or we could plunge into something that we want to preserve. So shoveling flat is what you do first. And what we do here is, you can see we're digging down to a certain point, right? This is plow zone out in the field. So these are all farm fields. And we're just simply removing this plow zone to see the next layer. That's all we're doing. Okay. Next, we're going to have petition. I may have spelled petition wrong. So I'm sure it's French. I don't see French, but petition is simply refers to the tool here that's being used. And what this is doing is a finer tool, finer than a shovel, that's going to scrape away the last bits of that plow zone. And underneath, you see this yellow soil here. And that's the soil we're looking for. This is what we call the subsurface or subsoil. Subsoil is a very, very old layer. It's older than human occupation, like computers done. And so nobody has ever stepped on that soil. And so we want to get down to there to be able to see if anybody has ever done a hole. So next step would be troweling. After you petition, you get sort of a rough cut on it, and then you take a finer tool and you trowel. And all you're doing here is you're just scraping away those last little bits of dark plow zone, and you're also trying to remove loose soil. At the end of this, you should have a nice, clean subsurface that we can later look at. And then this is the whole process, start to finish, in 30 seconds. So you just go real fast, dig. And then eventually we'll come in with our niches. We're doing our petitions, and we come back through the trowels, and there it's all clean. Now my computer's dying. There we go. And I take a photo, and then that's that easy. So after we clean down to the subsoil, what we're looking for are features. When I say feature, I'm talking about these dark stains that are left. So everything here is at the same level. And then we have these dark stains that are left in the subsoil. Here, I mean, two of them there. What these stains are simply punctures down into the subsoil that got backfilled at some point. So let's say somebody in the 1780s comes along and they dig a hole, and then that hole gets backfilled. And then 200 years later, somebody comes along and they do go through the process that I just outlined here. What you'll see are holes. You'll see the shape of the hole, and you'll see the fill that hole was filled with. That is what we're looking for. And then to figure out what it is, we dig the feature. So this is a very similar concept to what we did before. All we were doing is removing the feature fill, and we're trying to preserve the shape of that feature. So we're trying to simply remove all the fill out to show the original shape of the hole that was dug or placed. Now, not everything, of course, is going to be cultural. Not everything's going to be a post hole or a pit or privy or whatever. A lot of times we find ground ball holes, we find rock pools, which is just a plow, which simply pulled up a rock and then that divot gets filled in. All types of fun stuff. Anyway, so now that we all know how to dig a hole, we can start talking a little bit about the archaeology. The archaeology out here at Camp Security started in 1979. In 79, the State Museum of Pennsylvania excavated in the Least Upper Fields. They found 85 archaeological features, just like those pits that I was showing you. And those were in the form of dark soil stains. These stains were removed, and they were found to be 12 post holes and 72 pits of various shapes and sizes. The pits contained a sundry of things like straight pins, button blanks, pottery, glass. In total, they collected over somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 artifacts out of this area, out of these pits. One of the big things being the window glass. Window glass is one of the biggest, well, highest number artifact that they found out of this. Also, redware, which unfortunately redware is one of the most common artifact types on historic sites, but it's also the least datable. Redware started production around the 17th century, and you can now today go to Lowe's and buy the same stuff. And so you can't really date it very accurately, but it is very, very common on colonial sites, storage sites of all sorts, and here at Camp Security, it is our most numerous artifact. Okay, so given the location of where this excavation was and what they found, this was determined to be the site of Camp Indulgence. Given that it is up on a hill, so this is in the upper field. Also, given that that means the production. So we know that the prisoners at Camp Indulgence were producing goods. We know that they were selling those goods down. Also, big factor is that there is very little evidence of structure. The only structure we have is this sort of line of posts. That's about it. There's no stockade here, and there aren't very large posts either. This is most likely just a fence line, and it could even be later that it became used. Also interesting with this, side note, the way they excavated this was not the way that I showed you. The way they excavated this was they just took a bulldozer and pushed off all the dirt. That's how they did things. That's how they did archaeology in 1979. We don't really do that anymore. Reason being is because we want to make sure that we're not punching down into features as much. That's why we have all these sort of crazy big blocks everywhere, like long trenches, kind of zany looking. That's the reason why. It's because they pulled it really do it. Right. So that was 1979. In 2012, the Friends of Camp Security decided to do some remote sensing. They started off with magnetometry, to be specific. So that's what this machine right here is. It's a magnetometer. And what they did was they broke down the property into these blocks, and they just swept back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with this magnetometer. And what the magnetometer is doing is it's trying to read differences in the magnetic field down in the soil. And by doing that, It's an attempt to try and find what's under the soil without actually digging it up. What they found was that there's some anomalies here, a couple anomalies here, which they believe was from the 79 excavation. A big anomaly up here, and then right here by the Schultz house, another anomaly. Now, this one became the focus for our excavation in 2014. So here, the way we excavated this in 2014, we did a whole series of test pits, circular test pits, just like this. All you do is you take a shovel and you dig a circular straight down until you hit the subsoil. And it did a series of these, and the only thing that was found was a bottle lump. So this is in situ, what we would call it in situ, meaning it's just in the ground. Bottle lump, a bucket with a bunch of bottles. Some of these bottles were local. I mean, they're 20th century bottles. One of which I think was from the Emmonsville area. So not Camp Security. All right, so the following year, we decided to change up our excavation strategy a little bit, and we decided to start digging these long trenches. The reason being is we're able to dig a long trench, and the stockade, this trench, maybe the stockade runs through here, our trench will intersect it, and we'll be able to find it, the stockade. In 2015, we did not find the stockade. We did find a large pit, hand-dug pit. And this, I believe, is on like the last couple of days of the excavation, which is normal. Normally, you find the best stuff on the last couple of days. So, found a large hand-dug pit, but no positive evidence of camp. We did get a lot of evidence of Native American artifacts. So it's important to remember that Camp Security was in operation for like 20 months. It's a pretty short period of time. We have artifacts in Camp Security that date back as far as 6,000 years ago, and with continual occupation. So it's important to remember that Native peoples had been using this property most likely as a hunting ground for a lot longer than Camp Security was ever around. So we find a lot of, sometimes we'll find more Native American artifacts than we find historic artifacts. We did find some historics though. We did find a spoon handle and a wrought iron nail and some stoneware. And of course, good old red wire right here. Red wire. So in 2016, we used the same excavation strategy, just on the other side of the spring runoff. And here we found a lot more artifacts, actually. We found some vegetable, some more stoneware, bottle glass, nice squat bottle base, some buckles, button, more wrought iron nails, and musket balls. So we got a fair amount of period artifacts. However, feature-wise, we didn't find too much. We did find a trench. So we know that our trenching method works in terms of finding trenches. Unfortunately, this is the wrong trench. If you see, look closely, there's a nice little pipe running there. So that is a pipe trench, which runs from the spring all the way to the Schultz house, roughly this far. So another swing and miss. 160. In 2018, the Friends of Camp Security decided, let's go back and try a different type of remote sensing. And this time it was GPR. This ground penetrating radar. It works very similarly to the magnetometry, except it's sending down radar that will bounce off of the ground, go into the ground, and bounce off things and return. Do a bunch of math inside the machine and then produce a map, a heat map showing where we might have some anomalies under the ground. Probably should have made this map bigger, but here's sort of the lines of where they found a bunch over here and a bunch over here. They recommended, Schippenberg did, to excavate over here, which was just adjacent to where we had dug in 2016. So here we are, 2016. Now it's 2019. And the reason that this is the way it is because it intersects the anomalies. I think 4 or 5 times each. Unfortunately, none of the anomalies proved to be archaeological. They were all geological. They all turned out to be most likely some type of clay band running in somewhat linear fashion. That sort of just tricks us in terms of the cultural anomaly. This is why you have to always ground truth your remote sensing. If someone does some GPR or something and tells you 100% that that's definitely there, don't totally believe them unless they've done the whole. Don't really know. So in the 2019 season, we did find more historic artifacts. These are more pieces of Westerwald. Westerwald is a German stoneware that would have been popular during the period. Some white English stoneware, some nails, wrought iron nails, spoon handle again, and a bunch of quartz artifacts, lithics. We have a lot of quartz out on the site because there's a nice sort of natural outgrowth of quartz down at the northern end of the property. We do sometimes also get jasper, which is not native to this area. Jasper would have been more native to like bald eagle or the state college area. So Native Americans were most likely trading or traveling, bringing the jasper down into work. But again, in terms of the camps, nice. See, this is pretty difficult, right? It's a little elusive. So a major challenge with this site is it's just such a big space. There's 160 acres here. And we need to find a way to shrink down our possibilities, try to eliminate more space a little bit faster than having to dig long trenches and go through that process. Even though we can dig a test unit in 30 seconds, we're not going to be able to do this forever. So a way around this would be to do a large scale surface collection. And that's what we did in 2020. So all this area here was plowed up. And luckily it rained a little bit. And whenever a farmer or whoever, when you see a field that gets plowed over, not only is the soil being turned over, but artifacts that are within that soil can be turned over. And then water, hopefully. It's always a little easier when it's been rained on. And then you can simply walk across the field and you can find artifacts laying on the ground. That's what each of these red dots are. So each of these red dots is an artifact that was laying on the ground that one of our volunteers found, put a pin flag down, and then we went through and mapped it. You can see what we're looking for here are clusters. We're looking for groups of artifacts that stand apart from the sort of random scatter throughout. And we've got 3 areas. One right here, this is simply road trash. So Locust Grove Road is right here. This is just simply refuse from the road. Here, this is right behind the Schultz house. We found lots and lots of redware fragments. We also found shotgun shells and clay pigeon fragments. So somebody was doing some seed shooting behind the Schultz house. That's what we found out there. And then you have down here. Now down here, it's a little less clustery than over here, but there is a general higher concentration of artifacts on the west side of the Least Lower Field, and that's significant. Some of the artifacts that we found out of here, particularly the Least Lower Field, were King George coins, which would have been the currency at the time, of British currency at the time, and a sleigh bell, which still run, very, very exciting. Also, a button coil. Now, the button coil would simply just been a thin piece of metal that would have wrapped around a wooden button. This button coil is stamped with the number 33, and this refers to the 33rd Regiment, who were captured at the Battle of Yorktown and are included in a letter from George Washington saying which regiments are to go to which camp. And this group was sent to the camp outside of England. So this artifact is very significant because it's one of our very first that we can tie directly to not only camp security, but to a regiment. And you can even find some names. I'm not finding the exact name, but related to. Okay, so also in 2020 and a little bit in 2021, we did a shovel test pit survey. This was in the tree line between the East Upper and Lower Fields. The reason we did this was because there have been reports from the 79 dig and from a later survey that there were terraces in these trees, man-made terraces. And it was thought that these man-made terraces were similar to those that were found at Dyken Farm, which is up in Manhattan. It was a British encampment, and there they also had terraces where British soldiers built huts on the terrace. So it was thought that those terraces were related to camp security. Now, we did a shovel test pit survey, similar to what you saw in the 2014 slide, through the woods, and here's some of this. You might recognize this guy. This is Jonathan right here. Yeah, so we went through, we dug our test pits, and we didn't find much. We found some redware, but this was the yellow slip decorated variety, which is a little more dateable. It can be period. But that redware was mixed in with like modern glass and wire nails, things like that. So what that tells us is that there was a fill event. The soil was fill, it is fill, not natural. And it was placed sometime in the 20th century. And our final evidence of that really seals it is we have, this is the location of the terraces in 1938. All of a sudden now you can see these bands. So between 1938 and 1948, someone came along and built the terraces. So unfortunately, again, not related to the camp. So that brings us to 2021. And here we continued our trenching method, but we decided to speed things up a little bit. We brought it back a little, cheated a little bit. And we dug these trenches. And we also added some test units here and there. Now, we're going to start off with here. We have two big pits. If you remember that first pit that we found in 2015, that would be this pit right here. So I'll reopen this pit because it didn't get fully excavated. So we decided to go back and try and fully excavate it, see if we can find any artifacts. We didn't find any artifacts in there. We found a lot of rocks. And we found a person. There you go. But we did also find a second pit right beside it. This pit was similar to this pit, and that didn't really have anything in it, but it was very deep. It went down about 7 feet into the ground. And it got to the point where we couldn't excavate anymore because it was simply too wet. It was starting to hit the water table. We think that these were most likely attempts at wells, probably weren't active wells. Active wells, since they're open, you would find more things in them. We found hardly anything. We did find a lot of charcoal. So somebody at some point when they backfilled these holes, there were burnt some stuff inside the holes. And we did do some charcoal analysis on those the charcoal in these pits, finding that most of the wood is, well, actually all the wood is hardwood, local hardwood. So it would be like, your oak and walnut. So not surprising, but still interesting. If we jump way over to the west side of the field. In this area, we start finding a bunch of post holes. That's what these circles are. They're supposed to be no post holes. And this is one of the post holes right here, fully excavated. You can see, maybe you can't see, but it goes down to a point at the base of it. And that is pretty typical of a post. And this measures about a foot in diameter. So let's go to the next. So if we take a little bit of a broader view of this, we see each one of these little dots, these blue dots, boom, 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 all these guys, are post holes, but they're all scattered all over the place. We have no idea, we can't make any relationship between this and this, or this and this. We can't do that because it's a really big area. Because I guarantee you, there's a lot of stuff going on in between here. So in 2021, this is where we had now these little red dots are our posts. And our question going into last season was, what are these posts? Do they relate to something structural? And is that structure, if there is a structure, is that related to camp security? And in order to do that, you have to dig big test units all around this, try and find a post. And then you try and find the next post and the next post, and you kind of keep chasing posts. So here we are, 2021, and in 2022, we chased posts and we found a bunch of posts. So again, each of these red dots is post. And you can see, let's go next. So you can see just based off the post here, we have a few wall structures. We have a wall structure to the west, a central one, and then an eastern wall structure. The central one is interesting because they have massive posts, very, very big posts. The biggest is about 1.5 feet in diameter and about 3 feet deep. And these are usually paired with some smaller posts on one side of them. These smaller posts are set at an angle, so the post is pointing towards the large posts. So they're most likely supports or whatever structure this is. We don't know what the structure is, but we know that there is a big structure. Also, very interestingly, we have an internal structure or interior structure that is up against this eastern wall structure. And we also found some shallow pits with it as well. Now, these shallow pits did not have any artifacts, but they still may have been used as shallow pits for storage. They could have just simply been cleared out before they were built. If we jump over, that's the one thing. Well, there is a possible fence line further west. That's not the possible fence line, but that is not as important as this. The camp stockade. Hooray! We've been looking for this for like ever, right? We finally got there. So the camp stockade is simply a trench. That's what this blue denotes. Is a trench with a series of posts set within the trench. And you can see we've got some large posts, small posts. They're all variety of sizes. And small posts usually are functioning as pillars between the larger posts. Here's some photos. This sort of construction of the stockade follows every other stockade that we found archaeologically in Pennsylvania, for the most part. Think of places like Fort Loudon, Fort Necessity. They're all constructed with a trench that was dug, posts set in the trench, and then the trench was backfilled. And that's exactly what we see here. Exact same thing. So it's the next. Oh, we also have a fire pit down here. Which I will tell you, this brings us to present day. When I mean present day, I mean like yesterday. Because we're still digging right now. And we are about a week and a half left of our excavation for 2023. So let's go to 2023. So this is pretty up to date. As up to date as I can make it anyway. And you can see our stockade continues going down this way. We get more postals. I think currently we have like 70 postals or something in the stockade itself. And overall, outside of the stockade, we have over 50 postals around. A couple things that we're seeing. First of all, this pit, it didn't get fully excavated in 2022, so we came back to it this season. And we excavated a little bit and we found some window glass. Now, it is not old window glass, it is 19th century window glass. But that is important to know because this pit actually cuts into the stockade trench. So the stockade trench was here first, and then somebody dug a pit and cut through the stockade. And then backfilled it or had a fire in there or whatever. And they were nice enough to drop a little piece of window glass in there to let us know that this dates most likely to the 19th century, and this must be older than the 19th century, or at least older than this pit. Now, we already know based off this construction that it's a stockade trench. Stockades are diagnostic or they're unique to military sites. A farmer is not going to come out here and do this. This is major construction. So we already know that the stockade pretty much has to date to camp security. However, this helps confirm that it is definitely older than 19th century. In addition, so this is sort of early on, we've been trying to excavate this way. We've been finding some postals coming through here, and most likely our trench is going to follow. This is an early, we still have some digging to do, but this is an early interpretation. Our trench is also a little wobbly, little weavy. It's kind of not engineered, little ugly. And that's not surprising. The people who built this were not engineers, and they only had about a month to put this up. So they flew through and they built it, but they didn't do it very quickly. So the trench is not going to be very straight. And it's not, it just curves around, kind of snakes its way. Some other things, so we dug a little bit this way, a little bit to the east this season. And we started finding some post holes that are very reminiscent of this structure here. We have a line of posts starting to form a corner here and another shallow pit, which didn't have anything in it, but still a shallow pit. So we're excavating up here. And I can tell you yesterday afternoon, we did find a fire feature up here. So there was a fire. That's all I can say. We didn't take it. We don't have the full picture on that yet. And it might relate to this, whatever this structure is here that's starting to show. There's also a post up here as well that didn't get mapped yet. So this brings me to, this is a photo that was taken yesterday of people working, and it also shows the stockade pretty nicely. This big hole here, that's that pit. And then here we've been digging through, trying to found a few post holes, and we're trying to find that sort of trench fill. The challenge with this trench is that the soil is very similar to our subsurface. So in a lot of sites, your features are going to be very, very dark, very, very rich. Here we don't have that. Here we have features that are very, very subtle. And, they'll have little bits of charcoal bucky and be a little bit softer relative to the subsoil, but they're very difficult. The reason being is because this area does not get a lot of soil movement. So you saw how deep we have to dig to get to the subsoil. If we were further down towards the stream or the creek, we would have to dig about 4 feet before we got to the subsoil. That gives you an example of how soil movement. Here, the only soil movement you really get is erosion of soil leaving the field and going down towards the stream. So because of that, when this camp was built, the historic A horizon, so that's that first layer of soil that you see that if you were to dig a hole in your backyard, you'll see that first layer is real dark, real rich, because it's had grass, it has organic material. And that darkness will leach down into the soil and go through the layers. In general, as you go down, the soil gets lighter. Here, that A horizon must have been very, very thin. So when they dug almost straight into the subsoil. And conversely, when they backfilled, they also were backfilling mostly subsoil. The dirt they pulled out was subsoil and the dirt they put back in is mostly subsoil. Now, it's a little bit different. We can recognize it. It's a little darker in color. It has charcoal in it and it's much softer because it has been aerated. It doesn't have the natural compaction. But it is very difficult. The other thing is that these posts, none of our posts have post molds. And post mold happens when you have a post set in the ground long enough that it starts to mold in the earth. And it makes a stain in the ground, a unique stain, separate from just the hole that it's set in. So this tells us that whoever put these holes in here, whoever put the posts down, those posts were pulled relatively quickly, at least before a mold could be formed. We know that camp security, after it fell out of use, the people who worked descended upon it and took all the wood away and reused it. So hence we have no post molds. We also sometimes see some of our posts some evidence of pooling, evidence of jostling the posts. There from its removal. So yeah, all the posts were certainly removed. They did not rot. And that makes for a very difficult site to find. If there's anything to get out of this, instead, this is a difficult site to find. It is, though, a very important site to find. So camp security, like my first slide says, it is the last site of its kind in America. All the other sites were destroyed by development. I think there was a site, I think the Reading camp was destroyed not too long ago, 2005. So that left York as the last surviving prisoner of war camp from the revolution. So it has a very big significance to it, not only for York County, but also nationally. And that is why we spent like 8 years or so, and a whole lot of projects, whole lot of holes in the ground, looking for just this. And now that we have this, we can say that we have found camp security. But there are a lot of questions that remain. We don't know how big this is. I can't tell you what's inside or outside. I don't know. We don't know where the guardhouses are. We also don't know how big camp indulgence is. We don't know where the privies are. A lot we don't know, but this is a good start. Yeah, we've been at it for 8 years. We're just starting. So yeah. A big thing of our project is that we use volunteers. So everybody that comes out, except for myself and a few others, are volunteers. They do most of the work. They do all aspects of the digging. They dig the features, they dig the stockade, they'll dig the blouson. So if anybody here is interested in volunteering or just wants to learn more about camp security, you can visit campsecurity.org. You can also email the camp security email address with any questions or your interests. And if you have any questions related to history and anything else and camp security in general, you can also ask Judy Lloyd and John here. Yeah. So That's it. Anybody have any questions? Oh, my God. Let's just start up front. Right?
So it looks like you have basically a corner of the stockade or a corner, not necessarily a key corner.
Yeah.
Approximately how many feet do you have, you think, of what would be a stockade wall?
All right, so let's see, we've got. Oh, 30, 35 feet.
Okay, and now was I correct in hearing it's about 1,200 prisoners?
Roughly. Now, not all of them would have been in the stockade.
Okay, okay. So it might be quite a large area or maybe not.
We think probably in the order of like 2 acres, a little under 2 acres, somewhere around there. The reason being is because it's referred, one of the prisoner accounts refers to the size of the stockade as being a little under the size of the last canopy with that. It was like 2 acres.
And is the terrain around there all pretty flat?
It's on a slope, very a subtle slope. Right where it's at, it does flatten out. But it is, the whole field is sort of on that rising ground going up towards the indulgence site. Yes,
Directly in the middle, is that rock that's standing vertical?
this guy.
Yeah.
Yes, so there is as a part of this, so we didn't dig this all the way to the bottom. If we did, we probably need another couple months of excavation. So the stockade is most likely several feet deep. So in the interest of time, we're more interested in where it's going, the size of it, the shape, that kind of thing. Not so much knowing the depth all the way through, so we didn't dig it all the way down. What that gives us is that sometimes we'll find giant rocks that are just sticking. They're in the fill, and they were thrown into the fill most likely to help set a post. There's a very, very large rock. It's kind of hard to see in this photo, but there is a very large rock right here that is set at an angle.
You see the shadow.
Yeah, you see the shadow in there. And it's set in an angle, and there are actually a couple posts right here. So it's anchoring those. Yeah.
There's other rocks that are also in the vertically.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So also down here we have a big rock pit. You dug that yourself. Yeah. There's a big whole bunch of rock, big mess of rocks. We don't know exactly what to make of that quite yet. To be honest. It is certainly, there's a pit here that's full of rocks, but we think that the pit might be cutting, similar to this pit, might be cutting into the stockade. However, the stockade does have a bunch of rocks that are tumbled, that are just thrown in there. That's not surprising because there are a ton of rocks out here. It's like Stony Brook, so there's a lot of rocks. So yeah.
You originally mentioned about David Brubaker owning the land. Why wasn't it Schultz?
I don't know. Jonathan, do you know?
No, Schultz had sold it by.
Schultz.
Yeah.
It's just gold.
The later, because the show, this, we're talking about 27 years later.
So Schultz probably sold it to Brubaker,
Yeah, probably.
right? And that map then that you showed at the beginning, that was of the Brubaker land as according to Hively, or?
No, that's just the preservation.
Yeah, that's what's been preserved. They're originally, and it's, under 60 acres that we have preserved?
Yeah.
Okay, the original tract, because these people would buy big tracts of land, they would sell parts of them off. And I think Brubaker Schultz, well, the original property was like 200 feet or something like that. So this is the part that concentrate on, which is finally paying off.
Is that map on the camp security site, or where can you get that map?
Which map?
The one you showed at the beginning that is.
Yeah, it's in the archaeological reports, which are on the website.
It is on the website. And what do you, when you designate an area as West and Row,
Yeah.
upper and lower, where are those names coming from?
So row refers to the property owner, pretty recent property owner, at least it's the same. They're just property owner names. Family
Like
names.
modern day property
Yeah.
owners?
Yeah,
They were the owners of the property when the 1979 dig was being done. Claire Rowe was still living at the Schultz house at that time. And then the Weiss family was on the other side of that tree line.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jude.
Where's the location basically of the farmhouse to this picture here?
all right, it would be this way. Let me run back. We'll go to my big map. Gonna take a minute. Don't close your eyes. Here, I love it. Okay. Almost there. Boom, hey, okay. So here is the map in question. Here's the Schultz house, right here. Stockade, presently, about here. Does that give you an idea?
So that map and the one that you showed of the Spring and Sperry area, those are on those camp security.
Those are in the archaeological reports that are on the website.
Thank you.
One other question, whereabouts would guessing the cemetery would be at? Is it on the property
Well,
you have now?
that's a great question, so. Historical accounts say that the cemetery is about a quarter mile from the camps. So we say the camps are these two fields. Quarter mile. You're looking, now we've heard anecdotal stories of when Pen Oaks over here was built, that they found some cemetery remains, human remains. But that's hasn't really been proven. There's no documentation or anything that say that. It's just sort of stories, it's anecdotal. There is still completely possible that they could be over here. We don't know, really. But there are anecdotal stories that it's there.
And Camp Indulgence is in the Row upper field,
We suffer, I think.
so both are in the West land.
Yes.
Thank you.
And do we know why it was built out here?
Out of my work,
I mean, it's not exactly at that time period, it's not a lot out there.
that's why. Yeah, so it was, yeah, at the time period, York was kind of like a frontier area. It was hard to get to, it was across Susquehanna, still is across Susquehanna. And, yeah, it was more difficult to get to, and hence it would be harder for British to read this thing. Also, at the same time, story of camp security is also a little bit about like the story of like young America trying to figure things out. And we're if you look at the prisoners, they were moved all over the place. Eventually they came to York, and in York, when they got to York, nobody at York really knew how to build a prisoner of war camp. And there weren't engineers or anything like that. And they sort of threw it together and that's why the stockade is all weird. Yeah, so it's sort of like that's sort of the story of this. It's like, you know, we're just sort of figuring things out as we go. Also, unlike the, fair to mention, unlike the British, so when the British captured American POWs, a lot of times those American POWs would just sit on ships out in New York Harbor. For us, we had to move our POWs all over the place as the battlefield changed. Another aspect is why we moved all the time. So, yeah. Did I answer your question? I don't know.
Well, I understand why, I anecdotally understand why York, I meant why on Brubaker's.
Oh, yeah, so.
As opposed to someplace closer to town.
Yeah. So first of all is the water, well watered, that's the big thing. The other aspect of it is at the time it was wooded, wasn't being used. Although Brubaker says it's a property he is using, or his tenant is using. So those are the big reasons. The big reason is the water. It's watered enough to where you can feasibly set that kind of thing up and have everyone be able to drink water.
But there are a couple other considerations. The Americans wanted to keep the camp close enough to the Susquehanna River, so if the British were successful in pushing north, because they were in Virginia and the Carolinas this time, if they were successful in pushing north and came up along the west side of the Chesapeake and Susquehanna River, they could conceivably then come into York County from the west. And so they wanted to keep the camp somewhat close to Susquehanna River so they could move the prisoners across the river in that event. Also, originally the prisoners were supposed to go to Lancaster. Lancaster had an established facility, but it was already overcrowded by the time they got all those prisoners there, and so they decided to place some of the burden on York. And June can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Brubaker was what they call a non-juror. Is that correct, June?
I think, I'm not sure.
A non-juror meant that you did not take the oath of allegiance to Pennsylvania, which was the act to take an oath was passed in 1777. And so people who were non-jurors were, what should we say, out of favor with the ruling government at the time. And they would like to inflict pain on people who did not toe the revolutionary line. And that might be another reason why it was a Brubaker property. Also, he was an absentee landlord, so he probably wasn't living there to protest it. I mean, there's a lot of reasons.
From Lancaster down here.
Yeah, he was living in Lancaster County. The other thing to keep in mind is the road from York to Lancaster went a lot further south than the current Market Street does. And I'm not sure. The Schultz house actually theoretically faces to the north, although the south side now seems like it's the front, but it was the north side originally at the front. And I've heard accounts that the road from York to Lancaster went somewhere in front of the Schultz house, so it'd be even further south than Eastern Boulevard. Yeah.
Was Locust Grove Road was not there at that time either?
I don't know. It's on the 1860 map of York County, so it's a very old road.
Yeah, I think it's very, roads, a lot of times found that follow the boundary lines between property, and I think it is, I'm almost sure it's one of the original boundary lines of the original track.
And
So whether it was, so it is, Jonathan said, very early.
and what is the creek to the west there?
That's a branch of Christ Creek.
Yeah.
So
Stony Brook.
so it sort of looks like that was also a boundary line too.
Well, the original property went much further west. It went over into what's now Penn Oaks, if you're familiar with that area.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know if Edgewood Road was the western boundary or not, but it was probably over that far.
Thank you.
On the shoulders. Yeah, see, I'm sure what the ones that. Yeah, that'd be on the shoulders.
Any other questions?
So how would you decide, on that last, one of the pictures that had all, like you found the posts? And then I thought you mentioned that you then started digging up above instead of going to trajectory. Anyway, so
Yeah,
how do you make that, do you make those decisions? How do you make them?
I do make those decisions. I help sit. Let me go back to, go to that slide. The slide.
Is that right? I thought you said then you went up above and started moving.
So when we talking about when we first started in 2022, right? So we have this post here. This was the post that I decided to start with, simply because it's the biggest, the most posty of all the posts. And our first excavation units were these 4. Now, our first 2 were this one and this one. And the reason we opened up this one and this one first, because we have this little post here, so I was thinking, well, there might be a line. These 2 might be, it could be set on a line or something. And if that's true, then we'll capture that with this unit and this unit. What we ended up finding was when we opened this unit, oh my God, we have a monster. That's a 1.5 foot diameter, 3 foot deep post, right? Let's keep following this out. So now we have a line going. Then we open the next one. Then we open the next one. By this point, I'm pretty well convinced, all right, you have a line of posts. And I want to keep following it. So I open this over here, and then I open a series, bam, 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 and I get nothing. It just ends. All the while, you still have posts down here. And so throw in a couple posts down here, a couple over here, some more around here, and eventually this started to bear more fruit. And this sort of died out a little bit on us. It started to bear a little more fruit. And I started realizing we've got a structure. Then I started thinking, well, maybe there's a structure here, could be a structure over here. So we opened some more over here. Didn't find too much going this way. But I started to find some here. Then I started opening down. I knew I had a structure here. I wanted to see if I had another structure down. And for the longest time, we didn't have a structure, but we kept going down this way. And then we hit the stockade. And now the stockade is sort of driving our excavation. That's the thought process generally.
So then you will just continue to go down and then to the left?
So we'll continue to follow this out. Now, the thing also is sort of like time management and labor management as well. So like, if I've got 8 volunteers, right, and I need them all to be doing something. I'd like to have them all doing some, otherwise people wander around, so that's not good. So, when we dig this stockade, it's very difficult to dig. So, and it's a slow process. So while people are digging the stockade, I need to have other people opening other things. So there needs to be multiple questions going on at the same time. It needs to be, all right, we have the stockade going, right? But we also need to, I also want to know what this structure is about. We started opening some stuff up here because I want to see if there's, more posts, maybe another smaller structure up here. We have a big open area here. I'm sure there are posts here. There might even be another one of these. Let's put some units over there. All the while, we're still digging this out. So yeah. So primarily we're going south and west right now, or southwest. But we are still doing other things. We're sort of walking and chewing up at the same time.
Do you think all those random posts that they are associated probably with other buildings that were in the outside of this stockade?
Well, I think they're associated buildings with the camp, but I don't know if they're inside or outside of the stockade.
Still not sure on
I have
that.
no idea. Yeah, because this feels like a corner, right? But it might not be like the edge corner. It could be shaped like this or something. It could be, it could have any shape. I can't presuppose that this is the corner and that this is outside and this is inside. I just don't know.
Thank you.
We know, that you would have buildings outside the stockade. And the closest thing we have to a drawing is, they came here from Charlottesville. That was after being over the whole way over the northeast. And the reason they came is because the British were in Virginia by that time. We didn't get up this way. But the closest thing we have is a drawing, in Nathaniel Green's papers. Because he was a quartermaster general or something at that time. And, it's supposedly the plan for the camp at Charlottesville, which Sergeant Lamb says is, or one of the people says it was like that the camp security was 2/3 that size. I mean, so there are these little things that we have. Now, we have no idea whether anything in Charlottesville was ever built to look like that, but it is a plan and it shows the stockade, it shows the huts inside for the prisoners, but also shows like the huts for the guards, for whoever was in command at that time, the officer. So that's why you have to look for other structures.
That's why I was asking too. Thank you.
Anything else? Yes.
What do you do in the off season? Do you cover things up or is just all left there?
It all gets backfilled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we'll put, let's go to the next. So we'll grab plastic. And we'll put plastic down over this. We also have flagging tape that we marked with the feature number. So every single one of these posts, they all have features and feature numbers and paperwork associated with them, with our measurements and you know, notes and all that. For each one of these, we take a piece of flagging, we write the feature number on it, then we throw it down in the post. And then we'll take a piece of plastic when we're done. I'm here in a couple weeks here. We'll take a piece of plastic, lay it down all along here. And then it all gets backfilled by the township.
So the long-term goal here is to continue with your work for how long? And I believe I also heard somewhere that eventually we would want to maybe have like a walking trail that once we know what the structures look like and your work is done.
Yeah, so the sort of end goal would be like walking paths with signage. Right now, this property is very hard to get to without like a 4-wheel drive vehicle. So, or at least it's part of the problem. So it's public property, but it's not really accessible by the public. So the end goal would be to try and change that, put some walking paths in with some signage, sharing the history of the site and the ideology. Now, you would love for your walking paths and your signage to be reflective of reality and where you find the stockade and so on and so forth. So in terms of like archaeological plans, there's a lot to do out here. We can probably get the walking paths done in about like 3 years, but we would need a boatload of money and like more people.
Would that be done? Or well, how much longer you're doing your work?
Well, so it would, like I said, it's for now, my goal is simply just to follow the stockade out, figure out what the stockade is, maybe some of these other structures, and then that's valid as far as I deal with our current system of how we do projects. That would probably be a couple of years worth of work. Now, a broader project would be to do this, right? Let's say you want to put walking paths in, you want to do this stuff, all the stockade out, try to find more structures, but you'd also want to go back up to Camp Intelligence, and you want to try and figure out how big is that site. They only excavated about a quarter of it, and all they found were pits. Camp Intelligence was much more than just a bunch of pits.
Right.
So there's probably some structural stuff up there that we haven't found yet. And so in order to do that, that would be a bigger project. The scope of it would increase, and it would be like a sort of a university field school type thing. For that would be about, like I said, three years or so. Maybe more. There will always be more. That's the thing. But There will always be more, it's just, we want to answer the basic questions, that way, future researchers, future archaeologists can come along. And answer some of the more specific
And-
questions.
And so your basic is to at least get the stockade.
But the basic is figure out, number one, where the stockade is, we got that. Number two, how big is it, what's its shape, and what's inside, outside. And any related structure, so like I was showing you, some of the, there's some other structures north of it, that we found, but we want to sort of complete that puzzle a little bit more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your work.
So, you're gonna cover that all with plastic
Yes,
and then backfill it.
Yeah.
So in the future, the people won't see the actual structure. Like you
No.
have a picture of it.
it would most likely be like a picture of signage, that kind of thing. So the reason that we backfill this stuff, is because it's way better for the preservation of the site. We, even in our the process of digging this, we had one rain that sort of just randomly hit us. And that was the only rain we've had.
Yeah.
But even with that one rain, it sort of turned all of our features, like it melted them a little bit, it eroded them away. In order to preserve the site, it's better to backfill it. In the Northeast, in archaeology, you're not gonna find a lot of sites that are permanently open. That's not a thing that we can do. If you go to like Rome or Israel, or somewhere like that, there you will find sites like that that are like, they'll build actual structures around the site. Because they have tourists always coming in and looking at that. It's not feasible for us to do anything like that here. It's much better to backfill. My work, we map everything super well. So we get an engineering GPS to map and place our corners, bridge corners. We also do a photogrammetry survey, so we fly a drone and it takes photographs of the ground with it. And then it'll take those photos and it'll stitch them all together. And it'll create what's called an ortho photo, which is a sort of perfect top-down look. If you take a photo out of a plane, there's always going to be a little bit of curvature displacement. The ortho photo that's not there. Then there's also with doing it that way, you also have facial data, and it also measures the elevation. So what you end up with is a 3D model, basically, where I know the exact elevation and the exact location of everything here. Because of that, I'm able to come back out next season, and let's say this is all backfilled, right? I'm able to come back next season, let's say I want to start here, for whatever reason. I can put a grid corner right there, exactly where the nail was. And that could be 5 years ago. I could put a grid corner right there, exactly. So I don't need the site to be open to work. Or to continue from where we were. Now, if I don't finish something, then I have to go and dig through back. So the goal is always, whatever's been open, finish it. So that you don't have to go back and go dig through back. Yes.
Hi, question online. Where does your funding come from?
Yes, so our funding currently comes from PHMC, Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission. We were lucky enough to receive a planning grant. And that was for our excavation last fall, where we found stockade, and this spring, our current excavation, where we're following the stockade out. We've also received funding from the Appel grant, which is from the National Trust of Historic Preservation. Not for our current project, but that was applied for the fall project.
I'd like to add that John is not only an excellent archaeologist, but he's a wonderful grant writer. So he is actually the one that has been successful in writing these grants. so that we can continue.
And these grants are also matching grants, so we also receive donations. We raise money for Friends of Security to match the grants.
Yeah, put that on the video. We need money.
Got it.
Anything else? Okay.
All right, thank you. Our meeting is adjourned. Feel free to look at the document, come down to the copy before long up here. And there are some great things as well, some stuff with daily. So.